They lurk in the shadows, silent, relentless, unforgiving. For decades, they have haunted the dark corners of cinema, leaving audiences terrified, yet unable to look away. These are the killers of the slasher film, a genre built on fear, suspense, and the horrifying familiarity of the everyday. But how did these stories evolve? How did cinema transform the simple fear of the unknown into a cultural phenomenon that continues to terrify us to this day? This is the evolution of slasher films. The roots of the slasher films stretch back further than most realize. Before there were chainsaws or hockey masks, horror existed in shadows and suggestion. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho 1960 changed everything. The shower scene, abrupt, shocking, intimate, showed that terror could strike anywhere, even in the most mundane moments of life. Hitchcock didn't just frighten audiences, he transformed the idea of fear itself. The camera became a predator, and the audience became the victim. But Psycho was just the beginning. Across the Atlantic, Michael Powell's Peeping Tom, 1960, explored the voyeuristic side of fear, examining not just the act of killing, but the psychological darkness behind it. These films laid the foundation for a new genre, where the horror came not just from what you saw, but from what you imagined. The 1970s saw a shift, a subtle, sinister movement toward what we now recognize as the modern slasher. Films like Black Christmas, 1974, introduced a killer who lurked in the background, whispering threats through the static of a telephone line, unseen yet always present. The terror was no longer abstract. It was personal, intimate. Then came John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978, a low-budget film that redefined horror. It introduced Michael Myers, the embodiment of pure evil. Silent, unstoppable, and emotionless, he became the archetype for countless killers to come. Carpenter's use of the Steadicam to stalk his victims gave audiences the feeling that the killer was always just one step behind, breathing down their necks. Suburbia was no longer safe. The horror could strike anywhere, even in the heart of the American dream. The 1970s also established the formula: a final girl, a masked killer, and the inevitability of death. The stage was set for a genre that would grow in both audacity and brutality. The 1980s brought the golden age of slasher films. The genre exploded, fueled by teenage audiences and the rise of the home video market. Friday the 13th, 1980, took the formula of Halloween and amplified it. Camp Crystal Lake became a setting of terror, a place where adolescent sins were punished by an unstoppable force. The film's shocking violence and inventive kills set a new standard for the industry. Then came Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, which blurred the lines between reality and dreams. Freddy Krueger was no longer just a silent killer. He was a sadistic, sarcastic, supernatural predator. The horror was no longer just in the act of killing. It was in the psychological torment, the fear that sleep itself could be deadly. During this decade, the slasher evolved into both formula and spectacle. The masks, the weapons, the final girl. They became iconic symbols, cementing a visual language of terror that is still recognized today. The 1990s marked a turning point. After the excesses of the 80s, audiences began to crave something different. Slasher films that knew their own rules. Wes Craven's Scream, 1996, did just that. It was both homage and reinvention, self-aware yet terrifying. Ghostface was a killer who followed the genre's rules, and the film gleefully dissected them while still delivering genuine scares. This era reflected a cultural shift. Teenagers were no longer just victims, They were conscious of the horror, aware of the cliches, yet still susceptible. Scream showed that horror could be clever, ironic, and bloody all at once. The slasher had grown self-aware, and the genre would never be the same. The turn of the millennium saw the slasher film grappling with its legacy. Remakes of the classics emerged, offering updated effects, modern sensibilities, and in some cases, more intense gore. While some embraced nostalgia, others sought to push the boundaries further, exploring psychological terror and the isolation of victims. Films like The Strangers, 2008, returned to the basics: masked intruders, home invasion, fear in familiar spaces. The horror became more intimate, more personal, reflecting societal anxieties about safety, privacy, and trust. The slasher had evolved yet again, adapting to the fears of a new generation. In the last decade, the slasher has continued to evolve. Filmmakers experiment with structure, theme, and tone. Happy Death Day, 2017, combined slasher elements with the time loop concept, blending horror with dark humor. Your Next, 2011, reinvented home invasion horror, emphasizing clever protagonists and modern anxieties. The 2018 sequel to Halloween brought back Michael Myers, old yet terrifying, reminding audiences that some evil never dies. The genre has become a reflection of contemporary fears, technology, isolation, and the fragility of life itself. At the same time, the slasher has become self-referential, nostalgic, and ever aware of its own mythology. Why do slasher films endure? Perhaps it is the simplicity of the formula, the predator, the prey, the inevitable confrontation. Or perhaps it is the thrill of confronting our deepest fears from the safety of a theater or living room. These films tap into the primal fear of being hunted, the terror of invasion, the fragility of life itself. Over the decades, the slasher has reflected society's anxieties, evolving with each generation, from the subtle terror of Hitchcock to the blood-soaked spectacle of the 1980s, from the meta-awareness of the 1990s to the reinventions of today. The genre has remained a mirror to our darkest impulses. In the end, the slasher film is more than a story about murder. It is a story about fear, morality, and the thin line between life and death. And as long as shadows exist, so too will the killers that haunt them. They wait in the darkness, patient and eternal. Every scream, every shadow, every heartbeat, they are always there, stalking the corners of our imagination. And perhaps one day in the quiet of the night, you might feel their presence just behind you.